Welcome to Illuminati Silver. We tell the truth about silver. Today is Monday the 16th of December 2019. And earlier today we published a video entitled Equities Rise, So Does Gold and Silver, where we highlighted that this morning UK and European stock markets were up, and so were the prices of gold and silver. Now this afternoon we can see that whilst gold and silver is little changed from this morning, the FTSE 100 index is now up over 2%, and Wall Street's Dow Jones index is up 170 points at 28,305. The purpose of this video podcast, however, is an addition to the one we produced on Saturday, entitled What Does Thursday's Result Mean for Brexit and the Future of Britain?, where we interviewed controversially Greg and obtained his opinions on the UK general election result and its implications. Now this podcast is a discussion between Journo Marcus and controversially Greg, where they assess how quickly Brexit can now be implemented now that the United Kingdom has a stable government with a large majority. They also discuss what went wrong for Labour and conclude that the party's, their view, sneering contempt for its heartlands is what led to the catastrophic defeat. Labour has spent the last few years telling them that they were wrong about Brexit and didn't know what they were doing when they voted leave. Now they ask, is the Labour Party beyond saving? And is it now a party made up of hardline Marxists and middle-class students and academics totally out of touch with working people? Does the country have a credible opposition that looks like a government in waiting? And if not, where do we go from here in the interests of democracy? They've also asked, has Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party done damage in this election by denying the Conservative seats in constituencies where they split the anti-EU vote? And finally, they ask, what about social media's role in this election? It's now beyond doubt, in their view, that the Twitter mobs and the echo chambers bear absolutely no resemblance to how most people think and behave. Now, this interview is hard-hitting and frankly very negative for the Labour Party under a Corbyn leadership. Now, we do not necessarily expect you to agree with all that is said, and the view of the narrator is that this interview could have been given a little more balance and attention to some of the positive policies which the Labour Party were proposing, even though, to be candid, they were perhaps somewhat idealistic and failing to show how they could have been afforded, if at all. However, many of the sentiments were laudable, even though the economics could not be justified. Or perhaps they failed to justify them. So the narrator is of the view that the election was a little more than about Brexit alone. But that said, this debate is between controversially Greg and Journo Marcus. So sit back, pour yourself a cup of tea or coffee, glass of wine or a whiskey, and enjoy. Not forgetting, of course, to comment once it's completed, whether you agree with it or not. And finally, not forgetting, please, to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so, and press the bell sign so that you're notified of future videos as and when they are published.
Welcome once again to 20-Minute Topic with me, Journo Marcus, and controversially Greg. The election is over. Boris Johnson's Conservatives have won with a majority of exactly 80. There's lots to talk about, so let's crack straight on. Greg, I don't know about you, but it's become clear that this podcast, of all places, is the place to come if you want an accurate prediction, because we've been saying for weeks and weeks, or specifically I have been saying for weeks and weeks, and I've stuck by my prediction, a Conservative majority of about 80, and that is exactly what we've ended up with. And looking at why, people say to me, how did I come up with this prediction? And I was putting it on social media. I'm sticking with my prediction, a Conservative majority of 80. And people ask me, why did I get this? Well, there's two reasons. The first is that I learned many years ago how to interpret opinion poll data correctly. And I think mainstream journalists on the whole were looking too much at uniform swings rather than regional factors and constituency factors. And the other is, I think that inside the London bubble in which most mainstream journalists operate, there was not enough comprehension of just how angry people are in traditional working class communities about the fact that the Brexit vote they voted for 3 years ago had not been delivered. So I combine that with, I think there was quite a lot of pragmatism about the least worst option in this election, in that a lot of people felt they couldn't vote for a Corbyn-led Labour Party, and they were willing to give Boris Johnson the benefit of the doubt to a large extent. But here we are now, Greg. Boris Johnson has got a sizable majority, a majority of exactly 80. He will get his legislation, his withdrawal agreement, through Parliament. And then, and this is something I don't think has been talked about enough, yes, we will be outside the European Union by the end of January, but then we begin a 2-year process of negotiation on a longer-term settlement on the nature of our relationship with the EU.
I agree with you. You were accurate, but I'm not letting you be the only person who's conceited around here. I said that Boris Johnson would get between 37 and 42 more seats than he required for a majority. That is to get the government, to get to be the government, you have to get 326 seats, and he got 40 more than that. So both of us were absolutely spot on with the figures we were giving. His majority means that he will be in a position to deliver what the politicians of every party by a majority in the House of Commons promised to do. The result of the original referendum. It was the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats, and the SNP who chose to renege on their undertaking and dishonestly, in the part of the Labour Party, refuse to recognise democracy.
Yeah, that was a huge factor in this, and that's something we're going to come on to now. Because what we saw were, in many parts of the country, whether it's Mr Blair's former constituency of Sedgefield, places in County Durham, Wrexham, the Vale of Clwyd, Bridgend, working class communities have voted Conservatives. They've abandoned the Labour Party after many, many decades, 100 years in some cases, and gone over to the Conservatives. Labour has been pushed back into its safest heartlands now and the London bubble. It barely exists beyond that now. And this is an incredible situation. And I think Boris Johnson, in his victory speech in the early hours of Friday morning, he got the right tone there, I thought, because there's a humbling about this in a sense, because he is being given a chance in places where the Conservatives haven't been given a chance for many, many decades in quite a lot of cases. But with that comes a sense of responsibility and a duty to deliver. And these are parts of the country that have been underinvested in years. Not enough job opportunities, not enough job prospects. And the reason, as George Galloway said on his radio show some time ago, you go into the Labour heartlands and you ask, why did these people vote for Brexit? And yes, there is that little bit of an element, perhaps in a small number of cases, that they don't like immigrants, which is the stick that the London bubble, the London elite has tried to beat them with. But the reality is, they are concerned about uncontrolled mass immigration. They are concerned about crime. And they are concerned because, frankly, life just isn't very good. So I think this is an opportunity now for the Conservative Party. They have been given an opportunity to gain the trust of these communities, and that's a huge, humbling thing for them, isn't it, really?
I think it's the second time you've said in this podcast that the working class. I think what you actually have to realise about the Labour Party is it isn't actually the working class. To be specific, the very bottom end of society, the Labour Party has clamoured on behalf of, but done nothing for. The working class, as opposed to the benefits class, the Labour Party has done nothing for whatsoever. Now, when I say working class of that ilk, I mean those who do work the type of worker who 2 generations ago would have been basically manual labor, who, due to the invention of a Mr. Biro, a Hungarian, now wields paper and biro, is just as working class and more so, and he has done nothing for them. The Labour Party has never done anything for them. And the Labour Party has never done anything for the middle class. And the Labour Party has, without exception, kicked the bejesus out of the successful.
But I've got a different take on this, because I think something quite profound has happened in the Labour heartlands this time. I think it has been a clear rejection of the close to, if not actual, Marxist agenda of Jeremy Corbyn. Yep. It has been a clear rejection of the stench of anti-Semitism that's been around Corbyn and his cabal.
I agree.
Maybe not so much Corbyn himself, though to an extent Corbyn, but people around him and people as part of the Momentum movement. And as Kate Hoey said on television during the results programme, they have patronised and insulted those who voted Leave and their concerns. They've ignored their own voters. They've ignored their own communities. And frankly, those communities have now bitten back on that. They voted for Corbyn in 2017 because at the time, in that general election 2017, Corbyn said he would honour the referendum result. Well, we've seen Labour backpedalling over all that time. And I'm going to actually quote a personal friend of mine who I don't agree with politically, the former Cardiff Labour councillor Ashley Govia, who has got no time for Corbyn. And he put on Twitter, in reference to the Corbyn agenda, tax, spend, nationalise everything, hate business, hate aspiration, strivers and success, hate progress, dither, be morally superior, can't believe that didn't cut through. And that last bit is obviously sarcastic. But I think Ashley's got a good point there. Labour, in its current form, has nothing to appeal to the aspirational people who want to better themselves, the small businessmen. And these are the sorts of communities. We need small and medium-sized businesses in those former industrial heartlands if people are to get on. People who will open small, medium-sized businesses and to therefore employ 10, 20, 30 people. And therefore that's 10, 20, 30 new taxpayers, people paying into the system. People then have money in their pocket as well because they're in a job earning money to spend in the local community. This is an opportunity for the Conservative Party, if it gets this right, to really connect with those sorts of areas.
It went even further than that. I watched, as I believe you did, television coverage from the close of polls at 10 o'clock, right the way through to 7 o'clock the next morning, as the results came in, and I was absolutely astonished listening to every Labour commentator. They could not accept that they had betrayed their electorate. Their electorate had betrayed them, which is outrageous.
That was what I took from the coverage as well, because it was as though their gut reaction, particularly, as you say, the Labour pundits and the hard-left journalists who were appearing on the results programmes across all the different broadcasters, BBC, ITV and Sky, their instinct seemed to be to give their voters in their heartlands a good telling off, rather than take a moment to do what Ashley Govia has done. But to be fair to Ashley, he was never a Corbynista to begin with. Reflect on why they didn't vote for you this time. Reflect on the disconnect. And let me offer another little clue to these people who live their lives within the London bubble and the dinner party circuits of Islington. And ironically, Jeremy Corbyn is the MP for Islington and he had a stonking majority in his seat. Let's reflect on this. People in the former mining areas are not uncaring, but they're not overly concerned about woke issues. They don't want endless debates about transgenderism or pushing the LGBTQ plus agenda. They want to talk about jobs, cutting down on crime, dealing with the homelessness issue, dealing with the Brexit they voted for more than 3 years ago. This is how you connect with people in these communities. And I'm afraid that people from the middle classes going on television saying that effectively that their voters are stupid, insulting people like that, as Kate Hoey rightly said, no wonder they didn't vote for you.
Well, let's face it. Let us take the direct example and the obscene arrogance of Corbyn, who in his acceptance speech in Islington implied that the voters were the losers around the country because they had not understood the Labour Party and had thereby not voted for them very foolishly, and that he was not going to lead the party, in view of the results, into a future general election. Well, he wasn't going to lead them into a future general election because he would by then be far too geriatric to do so. Point one. Point two, he said, I will remain with the party, in other words, leading it, to do a thorough analysis, presumably, of why the Labour electorate was so stupid, and to seek out the policies for the way forward, in other words, how to get across to them Marxism and nationalisation of everything, and borrow, spend, and the huge plethora of free things they were going to get, like free broadband and a third reduction on rail fares. Was he ever going to fund it?
And that's something I think people saw straight through. I think that was something people saw straight through. But this brings me on to an important point, and it's this. In any democracy, it's healthy to have a strong opposition that looks like a government in waiting, because we know from history in Britain and elsewhere that when the opposition is weak, very often it leads to arrogant and complacent government. And we've had a question in from a friend of mine, a man I've known for many years, Tony Davis, who is a man of the left, but he accepts the referendum result. He would agree with our broad analysis of where Corbyn went wrong. And he asked me about the future of the centre-left. Now, what we've seen in the years since Corbyn became leader, and in the years since, is the very demographic of the Labour Party membership change very dramatically. We've seen this entryism of students and people on the hard left and the sort of middle-class academic classes, if you like, have joined the Labour Party. It's no longer a party of the working people, and it's not even the party anymore of the small and medium-sized businesses that backed Blair, particularly in his early years. So, for somebody, let's address Tony on this, Tony Davis, and say the future. Call it the centre-left, call it what you will. Is the Labour Party salvageable, or does a new party need to start from scratch and take the place so that there is a credible opposition? And in our adversarial parliamentary system, there is room for 2 points of view. Is there a need for a new party or a new movement to come along, which point one accepts the result of the referendum, and point two has something to offer those sorts of communities? Okay, they've given the Conservatives a chance now, maybe they'll stick with the Conservatives, but the importance of a strong opposition in a democracy cannot be underestimated, and something needs to happen, doesn't it?
Indubitably something needs to happen, but the big problem of starting a new party is it would take years to get the grassroots sorted out, because it would be a little bit like running a parish where you had a committee of frequently extremist people get involved at the outset, and it takes you quite a long time to weed them out and get competent people in place. Then the other thing is that with a new party, you have to set up a structure. You require, in the modern world, literally millions to set up that structure and get it up and running. That takes time.
And you and I both know from our own experiences that new parties and smaller parties are prone to splits. It happens time and time again, and conveniently enough, this brings me on to the next point I wanted to make. We're rushing through this because we've only got 20 minutes in this topic. It does what it says on the tin, this podcast does. 20-minute topic means exactly that. The subject of small parties, the Brexit party. And, well, I think there's two big points I want to make here. They cost the Conservative Party seats in this election. It almost certainly cost them 2 seats, even in Newport, a working class city, I should say, in South Wales. And we also, because of their actions, we lost decent people on the Labour side. In particular, reference I'm making there to Caroline Flint. I think this election has proven that Nigel Farage has behaved grossly irresponsibly.
I don't believe I've never agreed with Caroline Flint on anything. I am truly sorry to see her no longer in politics. She was an honest, competent woman. She had very different views to me, but she was an honest and outspoken politician who represented her people admirably in that she was a Remainer, her constituencies voted Leave, and she, having been elected to represent her constituents, campaigned heavily to honour the Leave vote. So there were politicians like that who ended up being bumped off the list by the Farage cult. I do not accept that it was the Brexit party. It never was, any more than the last 15 years of UKIP.
We're rapidly running out of time, so 2 more quick issues I want to get through. We can return to all this stuff in more depth in future podcasts. But Boris Johnson, we've talked in previous podcasts about how his various character weaknesses and his character flaws, and it's something I've talked about for many years, but his lack of attention to detail is one of them. I think it's very important that he now surrounds himself with the right sort of people and not just yes men or yes people, as I suppose we should say nowadays.
Boris, I would agree with you, is not a man of detail. He is a man of humour. He is a man of erudity. He is a man capable of putting on paper or delivering a witty, informed and educated speech. And I believe that he is now in the right position. He can hire a very large and very competent team of people to deal with the detail. But I notice that the very first thing he did was deal not in broad brush terms, but deal with the detail. In his statement when he had passed 326 seats, he thanked not the Tory party, not the Tory voters, but he thanked the Labour voters and Labour supporters who had lent him their vote. And I notice his very first foray beyond the Westminster bubble is to be in the north of England. He's going to Salford to personally thank Labour voters for lending him their vote.
And he's to be commended on that, certainly. Now, final point then. The quote of the morning on Friday was from Piers Morgan, as far as I was concerned. He said on Good Morning Britain, Twitter has once again lost an election. And his co-host Susanna Reid said, Twitter is out of touch. And that to me was spot on. The echo chambers and the trends of Twitter bear absolutely no resemblance to how people behave in real life. Quick comment from you, please.
I agree with you. The Twitterati are a farce. But then you have to look at somebody like Hugh Grant, who every single politician that he supported lost their seat, without exception. Nobody is listening to these people. And when they wheeled out the rather unfunny, self-opinionated comedian Stephen Coogan to give political insight to people, he just made a complete and utter fool of himself and was proven 100% wrong. That is the Twitter echo chamber, the bubble think, the group think, where people only listen to people who agree with them. You only have to look at the nationalists in Wales who were castigating the Welsh people and calling them everything under the sun because they were so stupid they didn't vote for the Nationalist Party. It's farcical. These bubbles, echo chambers, groupthink are making complete fools of themselves and proving to be wrong, and wrong, time and again on almost every issue.
My thanks as always to Greg, and my thanks to you for listening. See you next week.
We hope you have found this video interesting and informative, and if so, please give it a thumbs up and share it on social media. Please ensure that you have subscribed to our channel and press the bell sign so that you are notified of any future videos. Also, kindly visit our website at illuminatisilver.com, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe either as a free or paying member for regular email updates and offers. Disclaimer: Illuminati Silver owners come from a background of banking, international wealth management and economics. Having now retired from these worlds, we are not qualified to give investment advice. Therefore, this and other productions must not be deemed to be giving such advice and merely represent the personal views of its owners.